The council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive structure of crystal and light that had witnessed 1,000 diplomatic sessions. Inside, representatives from 47 worlds sat in their designated positions, their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. Some breathed oxygen, others methane, some had scales, others had fur or crystalline skin. But all of them shared one thing in common. They believed in the superiority of galactic civilization. Ambassador Velnus Korth stood before them, his tall frame rigid with professional pride. His blue skin caught the light from the chamber's artificial sun, and his 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he listened to the assignment. He had served the council for 200 standard years, longer than most species even lived. He had negotiated peace between warring worlds and guided primitive civilizations toward enlightenment. This new assignment should have been routine. Earth, the council speaker announced, her voice translated into 47 languages simultaneously. A planet in the outer spiral arm. The inhabitants call themselves humans. Velnus accessed the data file that appeared in his neural interface. He reviewed it quickly, his expression growing more dismissive with each passing moment. The planet was young, barely 4 billion years old. The dominant species had only achieved spaceflight within the last century. Their technology was crude, their society fragmented into nearly 200 competing nations. They still used fossil fuels, still waged wars over resources and ideology, still allowed poverty and disease to flourish in their populations. They are not ready, Velnus said simply. The data is clear. They have nuclear weapons, but no unified government. They fight among themselves constantly. Their entertainment media glorifies violence and conflict. By every standard metric, they are centuries away from even preliminary contact. The council speaker nodded slowly. She was a Velthorian, a species that had achieved peaceful civilization 15,000 years ago. Your assessment matches our preliminary observations. However, protocol requires a formal evaluation. You will travel to Earth, observe their civilization directly, and file your official report. The council expects this will be a brief assignment. Velnus bowed, the gesture automatic after 2 centuries of diplomatic service. I will depart immediately. My report will be complete within 1 rotation. Another council member spoke up, a being made of crystalline structures that chimed rather than spoke. Ambassador, do you foresee any complications? Velnus's expression was confident, almost amused. None whatsoever. Humans are predictable. Every primitive species follows the same pattern. They are tribal, aggressive, and short-sighted. They will either destroy themselves before achieving spaceflight capability, or they will mature enough to join galactic civilization. Currently, they are still in the dangerous phase. My recommendation will be to maintain observation protocols and revisit the question in another 500 years. The council members made various gestures of agreement. This was the expected outcome. Earth was just another primitive world. Interesting, perhaps, but nothing special. The galaxy had seen thousands of such species. Most destroyed themselves. A few evolved beyond their violent natures and eventually joined the peaceful community of advanced civilizations. It was simply the natural order of things. Velnus left the chamber and returned to his ship, a sleek diplomatic vessel equipped with the finest technology the council could provide. His small team consisted of 3 specialists, a xenobiologist, a cultural analyst, and a technology assessor. They were all experienced professionals who had evaluated dozens of primitive worlds. As the ship entered faster than light travel, Velnus gathered his team in the observation deck. The stars streaked past them in rivers of light, a sight that never failed to inspire awe even after centuries of space travel. Let us review what we know, Velnus began, projecting holographic displays of Earth into the center of the room. The blue and green planet rotated slowly, looking deceptively peaceful from space. His xenobiologist, a 4-armed Calesian named Thrax, gestured at the display. Humans are carbon-based, oxygen-breathing bipeds. They evolved from persistence hunters on the African continent approximately 300,000 years ago. Their biology is unremarkable by galactic standards. Average lifespan of 70 to 80 years. Single brain, bilateral symmetry, standard mammalian reproduction. The cultural analyst, a telepathic Mirosian called Senna, added her observations. Their psychological profile is concerning. High levels of tribalism and in-group preference. Their history is marked by continuous warfare. In just the last century, they fought 2 global conflicts that killed over 100 million of their own species. They have only recently begun to develop global communication networks, but these seem to increase polarization rather than unity. The technology assessor, a mechanical being named Unit 7, displayed various human technologies. Primitive, but developing rapidly. They have basic computers, limited artificial intelligence, chemical rockets for space exploration. They have nuclear weapons, but no defense against asteroid impacts. Their power generation is inefficient and polluting. By our standards, they are in the early industrial phase. Wellness studied the data with growing certainty. This would indeed be a brief assignment. We will observe from orbit for 3 days, then make direct contact with their governmental representatives. We will tour selected sites, review their cultural achievements, and compile our report. I expect we will be departing within 1 standard week. Thrax's forearms moved in a gesture of agreement. A straightforward evaluation. They are clearly not ready for contact. But Senna, the telepath, seemed troubled. I sensed something unusual in their broadcasts. There is a complexity to their thinking that seems at odds with their primitive status. They are aware of their own violence in a way most primitive species are not. Wellness dismissed the concern with a wave. Self-awareness does not equal maturity. Many primitive species recognize their own flaws. The question is whether they can evolve beyond them. Humans show no signs of such evolution. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. They approached slowly, their vessel cloaked from human detection systems. For 3 days, they observed. They monitored television broadcasts showing wars, crime, political conflicts. They watched news programs filled with disaster and division. They observed social media platforms where humans argued viciously with each other over trivial matters. Everything confirmed Wellness's initial assessment. Humans were violent, divided, and nowhere near ready for galactic civilization. On the 4th day, Wellness made his decision. Initiate contact protocols. We will meet with their representatives and complete this evaluation. He had no idea that everything he believed was about to be shattered. He had no idea that humanity's greatest weapon was the very thing he saw as their weakness. And he had no idea that he was about to become the most terrified being in the galaxy. The contact message was simple and direct. Wellness transmitted it on multiple frequencies, knowing that any species with basic radio technology would detect it. Within hours, humanity responded. Their message was surprisingly composed. Professional even. They agreed to a meeting at a location they called Area 51, a military facility in the North American desert. Wellness's ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, still cloaked from most detection systems. The planet was beautiful from orbit, he had to admit. Blue oceans covered most of the surface. White clouds swirled in elegant patterns, and green continents spoke of abundant life. But Wellness had seen beautiful planets before. Beauty meant nothing if the inhabitants were still primitive and violent. The landing site was surrounded by human military vehicles. Soldiers in uniform stood at attention, their weapons visible but not pointed at the ship. Wellness studied them through his sensors. They looked tense but disciplined. Their faces showed curiosity mixed with fear, which was a normal reaction to first contact. When Wellness and his team emerged from the ship, a delegation of humans approached. They walked with careful steps, their body language showing both caution and confidence. The leader was a woman in a dark suit, her gray hair pulled back severely. Beside her stood a man in military uniform, his chest covered with ribbons and medals. "Welcome to Earth," the woman said in English, which Wellness's translator converted instantly. "I am Secretary Martinez, United Nations Diplomatic Corps. This is General Park Min-jun, United Nations Security Council." Wellness bowed in the human fashion, a gesture his database indicated was appropriate. "I am Ambassador Wellness Korth of the Galactic Council. We come in peace to evaluate your civilization for potential contact." General Park stepped forward, and Wellness noticed something in the man's eyes that made him slightly uncomfortable. There was an intelligence there, a calculating quality that seemed at odds with a primitive species. "Evaluate us." End quote, Park said slowly. "That is an interesting word choice. Not meet with us or establish relations. Evaluate." Wellness felt a small flutter of surprise. Most primitive species were so overwhelmed by first contact that they missed such nuances. It is standard procedure. The Galactic Council has protocols for determining when a species is ready to join the greater community. "And you believe we are not ready," Secretary Martinez said. "It was not a question. Our preliminary observations suggest you have much development ahead of you," Wellness replied diplomatically. "Your world is divided into competing nations. You still engage in warfare. Your technology is in its early stages. These are not criticisms, merely observations. Many species go through this phase." General Park smiled, but the expression did not reach his eyes. "And those species that do not pass your evaluation? What happens to them?" "We maintain observation protocols and return for re-evaluation at appropriate intervals, usually every few centuries." "Centuries," Park repeated. "That is a long time for humans. We change significantly in much shorter periods." They moved inside the facility, into a large conference room that had been prepared for the meeting. Wellness and his team sat on one side of a long table, the humans on the other. More humans entered, carrying devices that Wellness recognized as primitive recording equipment. For several hours, they talked. Wellness asked questions about human government, technology, and culture. Secretary Martinez answered most queries professionally, providing data and context. But throughout the conversation, General Park watched Wellness with those calculating eyes, occasionally asking questions of his own that seemed designed to probe rather than inform. "Your council," Park said, during a brief pause. "How many species are members?" 47 full members, with another 133 in various stages of associate membership. "And in all the history of your council, how many species have been rejected for membership?" Wellness hesitated. The question seemed innocent, but something about it felt like a trap. Rejection is rare. Most species either achieve the necessary development naturally, or they destroy themselves before reaching that point. "How many have been destroyed by council members?" Park asked, his voice still calm but his eyes sharp. "The council does not destroy civilizations," Wellness said firmly. "We are a peaceful organization. Violence was abandoned by our member species thousands of years ago." "Abandoned," Park repeated, leaning back in his chair. "Or evolved beyond." Wellness frowned, his four eyes blinking in confusion. "They are the same thing, are they?" Park glanced at Secretary Martinez, who gave a small nod. "Ambassador Wellness, we would like to show you something before you complete your evaluation. A demonstration of human culture and achievement." "Of course," Wellness said, relieved to move past the uncomfortable questioning. "We would be honored to see your accomplishments." But as they left the conference room, Wellness noticed something that troubled him. The human soldiers they passed in the corridors did not look at the aliens with wonder or fear. They looked at them with assessment, the way a predator might size up an unfamiliar creature. And more disturbing, some of them seemed almost amused, as if they knew a secret that Wellness did not. The humans provided transportation, a primitive aircraft that carried them across the continent. Wellness and his team sat in comfortable seats, while Secretary Martinez explained where they were going. "We are taking you to several sites that we believe will give you a complete picture of humanity." "Your greatest cities?" Thrax asked. "Something more important than that," General Park said from across the aisle. "We are going to show you who we really are." The first stop was a museum in Washington, D.C. But as they walked through the entrance, Wellness realized this was not a celebration of human achievement. The walls were covered with photographs of emaciated prisoners, mass graves, and gas chambers. His translator identified the location: the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. For 2 hours, the humans led them through exhibits documenting the systematic murder of millions of people during something called World War II. Wellness saw images of children being separated from parents, of medical experiments, of bodies stacked like cordwood. His xenobiologist turned away from several displays, unable to process the cruelty. "Why are you showing us this?" Wellness finally asked, his voice shaking. "Why would you preserve such horrible history?" General Park stood before a wall covered with photographs of the dead. "Because we must never forget. This happened within living memory, Ambassador. My own grandmother survived a similar genocide in Korea. These atrocities were committed by ordinary humans. People who had families, and jobs, and dreams. They were not monsters. They were us." "But this is exactly what concerns the Council," Wellness said. "This violence, this capacity for cruelty. This is why you are not ready." "In example," Secretary Martinez shook her head slowly. "You misunderstand, Ambassador. We do not show you this to prove we were violent. Every species in your council was probably violent at some point. We show you this to prove we remember. We show you this to prove we choose, every single day, not to repeat it." Something in her words made Wellness deeply uncomfortable, though he could not articulate why. They left the museum and flew to another location, then another. Each site was similar: memorials to atomic bomb victims in Japan, genocide remembrances in Cambodia, slavery museums in West Africa, war cemeteries in Europe where white crosses stretched to the horizon. By the end of the day, Wellness was exhausted and disturbed. As they returned to the military facility, he turned to General Park. "I do not understand the purpose of this. You have shown us nothing but humanity's failures." Park looked at him with those penetrating eyes. "Tomorrow, Ambassador, we will show you what we have built on top of those failures. And then, you will understand exactly what kind of species we are." That night, alone in his quarters aboard the ship, Wellness reviewed the day's events. He tried to write his report, but the words would not come. Something about the humans' approach troubled him deeply. Every species had dark history, but the galactic civilizations had buried that history, moved beyond it, evolved past it. Humans seemed to carry their darkness with them deliberately, like a weight they refused to put down. And for the first time since arriving on Earth, Wellness wondered if perhaps he had misunderstood what he was evaluating. The second day began with another flight, this time to Geneva. The humans brought Wellness and his team to the headquarters of something called the International Committee of the Red Cross. Inside, they met doctors and aid workers who had served in war zones, disaster areas, and epidemic outbreaks across the planet. A human woman named Dr. Sarah Chen spoke to them in a quiet conference room. She was young, perhaps 30 years old, but her eyes held the weight of someone much older. "I have worked in 6 active war zones," she explained. "I have treated soldiers from both sides of conflicts. I have held children as they died from preventable diseases. I have seen humans at their absolute worst." "Then you understand our concerns," Wellness said, leaning forward. "You see the violence we observed in your broadcasts and history." Dr. Chen smiled sadly. "I see it every day. But I also see something else. I see the soldiers who refuse to shoot civilians, even when ordered. I see enemy combatants sharing medical supplies. I see people running into burning buildings to save strangers. I see humans choosing to be better than their instincts every single day. Thrax, the xenobiologist, spoke up. But doctor, your species still wages war. You still harm each other. How can you claim to be choosing peace? Because choosing is not the same as succeeding, Doctor, Chen replied. Let me ask you something, Ambassador. Your species, the Centaurians, when did you last experience violent impulses? Velnus blinked his 4 eyes in confusion. We do not have violent impulses. We evolved beyond such things millennia ago. Our brains are structured differently than yours. Exactly, Dr. Chen said, her voice gentle but firm. You do not choose peace because you do not have to. You are peaceful by nature. But humans? She gestured at the walls, which were covered with photographs of humanitarian missions. We have to choose it. Every single day. Billions of humans wake up with the capacity for violence in their hearts, and billions of humans choose not to act on it. We are not peaceful. We are warriors who have chosen to fight our own nature instead of each other. The words hung in the air like a weight. Velnus felt something shift in his understanding, a small crack in his certainty, but before he could process it, General Park stood up. Come, Ambassador. There is more to see. They traveled to research facilities where human scientists worked on cures for diseases, on clean energy technologies, on methods to feed their growing population without destroying their environment. They visited schools where children from dozens of different ethnic backgrounds learned together. They toured the United Nations building where representatives from 195 nations attempted to solve global problems through dialogue rather than warfare. At each location, the pattern was the same. Humans showed Velnus their progress, but they also showed him their struggles. They did not hide their failures. They did not pretend to be more advanced than they were. Instead, they demonstrated something that Velnus found increasingly disturbing: self-awareness. By evening, they arrived at a military base in Colorado, built inside a mountain. General Park led them deep underground, through security checkpoints that used technology more advanced than Velnus expected. Finally, they entered a command center filled with screens and computers, where dozens of military personnel monitored data streams. This is NORAD, Park explained. Our early warning system for nuclear attacks and space threats. It has been operational for over 60 years. Velnus studied the screens, his translator working to interpret the military codes and symbols. You maintain constant vigilance against your own weapons. Yes, Park said simply. Because we know what we are capable of. Because we remember Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Because we understand that our capacity for destruction requires eternal watchfulness. Secretary Martinez joined them, gesturing to a particular screen. Ambassador, may I ask you about the Galactic Council's military capabilities? Velnus felt surprised by the question. The Council has no military. We have peacekeeping forces for emergencies, but we have not fought a war in over 8,000 years. War is a relic of primitive times. And if you were attacked? Park asked. If a hostile force threatened your worlds? It is not possible. There are no hostile forces. All advanced species abandon violence as they mature. Park and Martinez exchanged a glance. Something passed between them. A silent communication that made Velnus uneasy. Ambassador, Park said carefully, what happens to species that do not abandon violence as they advance technologically? They destroy themselves. It is the great filter. A species cannot achieve advanced technology while maintaining violent tendencies. The combination is self-destructive. Is it? Park gestured, and one of the screens changed. It displayed a simulation, a tactical scenario playing out in rapid motion. Velnus watched as human forces responded to a hypothetical alien invasion. The efficiency was remarkable, but what disturbed him was the doctrine. Humans retreated strategically, traded space for time, launched guerrilla operations against superior technology. They used their own planet's geography as a weapon. They calculated acceptable losses with cold precision. This is a training exercise, Park explained. We call it Red Dawn Protocol. We have been running simulations like this for 40 years. Ever since we first detected anomalous signals from space, Velnus felt his skin grow cold. You have been planning for war with civilizations you did not even know existed? We have been planning for every possibility, Martinez said. It is what humans do, Ambassador. We hope for peace, but we prepare for war. Because our history has taught us that hope alone is not enough. A human military officer approached, a woman with sharp features and calculating eyes. General Park. The demonstration is ready. Park nodded, then turned to Velnus. Ambassador, I want to show you something that will help you understand humanity. This is a psychological evaluation that every human in a leadership position must complete. It is called the trolley problem. He explained a scenario. A runaway trolley is heading toward 5 people tied to tracks. You can pull a lever to divert it to a different track. But one person is tied there. Do you pull the lever, killing one to save 5? It is a simple calculation, Velnus said. 5 lives are worth more than 1. Most of our council species would agree, Park said. They would pull the lever without hesitation, because the mathematics are clear. But humans? He smiled grimly. Humans agonize over it. We understand the mathematics, but we also understand the weight of choosing to kill, even to save others. We carry that burden personally. He pulled up statistics on the screen. In studies, about 70% of humans say they would pull the lever. But when placed in realistic simulations, nearly half of them freeze. They cannot bring themselves to take an action that directly causes death, even to prevent greater death. And those who do pull the lever, they carry guilt for the rest of their lives. That is inefficient, Senna, the telepathic analyst, said quietly. That emotional burden serves no purpose, doesn't it? Park asked. That burden is what keeps us human. That guilt is what makes us hesitate before taking life, and that hesitation, multiplied across billions of people, is what has prevented us from destroying ourselves, despite having the means to do so for 80 years. Velnus felt overwhelmed, his thoughts spinning. You are saying that your weakness is your strength? No, Secretary Martinez said firmly. We are saying that we have no illusions about what we are. We are violent, tribal, aggressive creatures who have chosen to build civilization anyway. We fail constantly. We hurt each other. We wage wars. We make terrible mistakes. But we remember every failure. We carry the weight of every mistake. And we keep trying to be better. Park led them to another room, smaller and more intimate. On the walls were photographs of humans in various situations. A soldier carrying a wounded enemy, a firefighter running into a collapsing building, a doctor treating a patient with an infectious disease, a parent standing between their child and danger. This is what the other species in your council do not understand, Park said quietly. They do not have to choose courage because they do not experience fear. They do not have to choose compassion because they do not have cruel impulses. They do not have to choose sacrifice because they do not have self-preservation instincts as strong as ours. End. He turned to face Velnus directly. Every act of human goodness is a victory against our own nature. Every moment of peace is a battle won against violence. Every gesture of kindness is a choice made despite our capacity for cruelty. We are not evolved beyond violence, Ambassador. We are warriors who fight ourselves every single day. Velnus felt something break inside his certainty. He looked at the photographs, at the faces of humans choosing to be more than their instincts demanded. He thought about his own species, about how easy peace was when violence was not in your nature. He thought about the Galactic Council, about all those advanced civilizations that had achieved harmony by evolving beyond conflict. And for the first time, he wondered if perhaps humanity's constant struggle was not a sign of their primitiveness, but something else entirely. Something the galaxy had never seen before. Tomorrow, General Park said. "We will show you our greatest achievement. And then, Ambassador, you will understand exactly what kind of species you are evaluating." That night, Velnus could not rest. He stood in his ship, staring at Earth through the viewport, and felt the first cold touch of something he had not experienced in 200 years of diplomatic service. He felt afraid. The third day began differently. When Velnus emerged from his ship, he found General Park waiting alone. The general was dressed in combat fatigues rather than his formal uniform, and his expression was serious. "Today will be difficult, Ambassador," Park said without preamble. "Today we show you what humanity is truly capable of. I want to be clear. You can refuse at any point. What you see may change how you view us, and not in a positive way." Velnus felt his hearts beating faster. "I am here to complete a full evaluation. I will see what you wish to show me." They flew south to a facility built into the mountains of Colorado. The security was intense. Biometric scanners, armed guards, thick blast doors that could withstand nuclear weapons. They descended deep underground, passing through level after level of checkpoints. Finally, they entered a massive command center that made the NORAD facility look primitive by comparison. The room was filled with screens showing data that Velnus's translator struggled to interpret. Star maps, weapon trajectories, deployment schedules, strategic simulations. Human officers worked at stations with an efficiency that spoke of endless training. But what drew Velnus's attention was the central display, a three-dimensional map of the galaxy showing over 4,000 marked locations. "Welcome to UNSC Strategic Command," Park said quietly. This facility became operational 3 years ago. It employs 12,000 personnel across 3 shifts. Its primary purpose is galactic threat assessment and response planning. Velnus stared at the display, his 4 eyes wide. "Those markers, those are worlds in Council space." "Yes," Park confirmed. "We have identified and mapped every known Council world, every major military installation, every communication hub, every resource depot. We have been observing you, Ambassador, for longer than you have been observing us." A human admiral approached, a stern-faced woman named Rodriguez. She gestured to the displays. "Ambassador, I want to show you something. Computer, load scenario. Omega 7, the central display changed. It showed Earth surrounded by hostile ships, then spreading outward as human forces deployed across the solar system. Velnus watched as the simulation played out. Human ships, using technology that should not exist yet, engaged enemy vessels with tactics that were brutally efficient. They used asteroid fields as cover, deployed weapons that disrupted sensors, launched guerrilla raids from hidden bases throughout the solar system. "This is your response to invasion?" Velnus asked, his voice shaking. "This is our response to your invasion specifically," Admiral Rodriguez said calmly. "We have detailed scenarios for engagement with each of the 47 Council species. We have analyzed your weapons, your tactics, your cultural approaches to warfare. We have identified weaknesses in each of your defensive doctrines." Park pulled up another display. "The Centaurians, your people, rely heavily on shields and energy weapons, but you have no experience with kinetic warfare because it has been considered obsolete for millennia. We have simulations showing that simple railgun projectiles would overwhelm your defenses. Your ships are not built to handle the kind of mass driver fire that humans developed for asteroid mining." Velnus felt sick. "You are planning to attack the Council?" "No," Park said firmly. "We are planning to survive if the Council attacks us. There is a difference, Ambassador, but I need you to understand something crucial." He gestured to the room full of personnel. "Every person in this facility is a volunteer. Every one of them has sworn an oath to defend humanity, and every one of them hopes they will never have to use the plans we have created here." Another human approached, a civilian this time. She was introduced as Dr. Lisa Park, the General's sister and the Director of Advanced Weapons Research. Ambassador, may I show you something? She led them to an adjacent laboratory where scientists worked on projects that made Wellness's blood run cold. He saw biological warfare agents, designed to target specific alien physiologies, quantum entanglement weapons that could strike targets light years away, nanomachines swarms that could disassemble enemy ships at the molecular level, stellar cartography showing how to induce instabilities in certain types of stars. This is monstrous, Thrax whispered, his forearms trembling. You are developing weapons to commit genocide. Dr. Park's expression was cold and clinical. We are developing deterrence. Every weapon you see here is cataloged and controlled. We have international treaties limiting their production and deployment. But we need you to understand. If humanity is threatened, we will use every tool available to ensure our survival. She pulled up a display showing Earth's population. 8 billion humans. That is what we protect, Ambassador. 8 billion individual lives, each one precious and irreplaceable. And we will do anything, become anything, to keep them safe. General Park led Wellness back to the command center. Ambassador, I want to show you the most important simulation we have. He nodded to Admiral Rodriguez, who activated a new scenario. The display showed a different kind of conflict. Human ships approached Council space, not with weapons, but with knowledge. They revealed evidence of human capabilities to the Council, demonstrated their weapons from a safe distance, then transmitted a simple message: leave us alone, and we will leave you alone. Leave us alone. End quote. Leave us alone. Leave us alone. This is our preferred outcome. Park explained. We do not want war. We do not want to conquer or dominate. We want to be left in peace to develop at our own pace. But we need the Council to understand that we are not helpless primitives waiting to be guided or uplifted. We are a sovereign species, with the means and will to defend ourselves. Wellness turned to face Park directly. You have been planning this since before we arrived. You knew we were coming. We detected your observation drones 8 years ago, Park confirmed. We captured one, reverse-engineered it, and used it to identify Council space. We have been preparing ever since. But why? Wellness demanded, his voice breaking. Why all this? We meant no harm. The Council only seeks to help primitive species avoid self-destruction. Park's expression softened slightly. Ambassador, let me tell you a story about human history. Centuries ago, when European nations first encountered less technologically advanced cultures, they claimed to be bringing civilization and enlightenment. They genuinely believed they were helping. But what they actually brought was conquest, disease, cultural destruction, and slavery. The road to hell, as we say, is paved with good intentions. He gestured at the displays around them. The Council may mean well, but you come to Earth with the assumption that you know what is best for us. You evaluate us by your standards, judge us by your values, and make decisions about our future without our input. That, Ambassador, is not help. That is domination, no matter how benevolent you believe it to be. Secretary Martinez entered the command center, her expression grave. Ambassador Wellness, it is time for you to make a choice. You have seen what humanity is capable of. You have seen our weapons, our plans, our determination. Now you must decide what to tell the Council. She pulled up a final display showing 2 scenarios. In one, the Council maintained its observation protocols and left humanity alone. In the other, the Council attempted intervention or quarantine. The second scenario played out with devastating consequences for both sides. We do not want to be the galaxy's enemies, Martinez said. But we will not be its children either. We are offering the Council a third option. Recognize humanity as a sovereign species with the right to develop independently. Give us time to grow at our own pace. And perhaps, in a few centuries, we will be ready to join your community as equals rather than inferiors. Wellness looked around the command center, at the humans working calmly at their stations, at the weapons data, at the strategic plans. He thought about everything he had seen over the past 3 days, the memorials to human cruelty, the hospitals and schools, the soldiers and scientists, the capacity for both terrible violence and incredible compassion. He finally understood what humans had been trying to tell him. They were not a primitive species waiting to evolve. They were warriors who had chosen peace. They were violent creatures who had built civilization despite their nature. They were self-aware enough to know their own darkness and strong enough to fight it every single day. And most terrifying of all, they had been watching the Council just as long as the Council had been watching them. They had prepared for every possibility. They had built weapons that could threaten species thousands of years more advanced. Not because they wanted war, but because they refused to be helpless. I understand now, Wellness said quietly. You are showing me all of this as a message to the Council. Yes, Park confirmed. We need the Council to understand that humanity is not a primitive species to be managed. We are a dangerous species that has chosen restraint. We have the means to wage war across the galaxy, but we have chosen not to. That choice should be respected, not because we are weak, but because we are strong enough to make it. Admiral Rodriguez added, Every day we do not attack is a gift, Ambassador. Every day we keep these weapons locked away is a choice. The Council should understand the value of that choice. Wellness felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. What he reported to the Council would determine humanity's future. He could recommend intervention, which might trigger the exact conflict humanity had prepared for. He could recommend continued observation, which would insult humanity's sovereignty. Or he could recommend something the Council had never done before: recognize a violent species as equals. I need time to think, Wellness said, his voice hollow. Take all the time you need, Park said. But know this, Ambassador. Humanity is done being observed. One way or another, we will make our presence known to the galaxy. The only question is whether we do so as friends or enemies. That choice is now in your hands. That night, Wellness sat alone in his ship, staring at his incomplete report. His hands shook as he tried to write, tried to find words to describe what he had learned. He thought about the Galactic Council, about those peaceful species who had forgotten what it meant to struggle against their own nature, and he wondered if perhaps humanity's greatest danger was not that they might attack the galaxy, but that they might teach the galaxy something it had forgotten. That peace without the capacity for violence is not peace at all. It is simply the absence of conflict, maintained only because there is no one left to fight. True peace, the kind humanity practiced, required daily courage. It required billions of people choosing restraint over instinct. It required warriors who fought themselves instead of others. And Wellness realized, with dawning horror, that if the Council tried to intervene in humanity's development, they would learn this lesson the hard way. The journey back to Council space took 14 days. Wellness spent most of that time alone in his quarters, staring at the incomplete report on his display. His team avoided him, sensing his turmoil. They had seen what he had seen, and they too struggled with what it meant. On the third day of travel, Senna, the telepathic analyst, came to his quarters. Her usually serene expression was troubled. Ambassador, I need to tell you something. During our time on Earth, I maintained passive telepathic monitoring of the humans around us. Wellness looked up. That is standard protocol for first contact. What did you sense? Fear, Senna said quietly. Constant, pervasive fear. But not fear of us. They were afraid of themselves, of what they might have to become if we proved hostile. Every human we met, from Secretary Martinez to General Park to the lowest-ranking soldier, they all carried this fear. The fear that they might have to use those terrible weapons they created, The fear that they might have to become monsters to protect their species. She sat down, her form shimmering with distress. Ambassador, my species abandoned violence 500,000 years ago. We do not understand fear anymore. But humans? They live with it every day, and they still choose peace. That choice, made despite fear, rather than in the absence of it, that is something I have never encountered before. Wellness nodded slowly. I have been thinking about that. The Council species achieved peace because we evolved beyond violence. It was natural, inevitable. But humans have to fight for peace every single day. They have to choose it constantly, despite every instinct telling them to fight, to compete, to dominate. Thrax joined them, his forearms moving in agitation. The biological warfare agents they showed us, Ambassador, those were designed specifically to target Council species. They had detailed genetic maps of 47 different alien physiologies. How long have they been preparing? 8 years, according to General Park, Wellness replied. 8 years since they detected our observation drones. In less than a decade, they went from barely understanding they were being watched to developing weapons that could threaten civilizations thousands of years older. Unit 7, the mechanical analyst, entered last. Unlike the others, the artificial intelligence seemed calm. Ambassador, I have completed my analysis of human technological development. Would you like to hear my conclusions? Please. Humans do not develop technology linearly like most species. They make sudden jumps, often during periods of conflict or crisis. Their 2 world wars accelerated development by centuries. Their Cold War drove rapid advances in computing, space travel, and weapons systems. They use fear and competition as motivators in ways that peaceful species cannot. Unit 7 displayed a projection. If humans continue at their current rate of development, they will achieve faster than light travel within 50 years. They will have weapons capable of threatening Council space within a century. And most concerning, they will do this whether we intervene or not. Intervention might slow them temporarily, but it would also make them hostile. They would develop specifically to counter Council technology, which they have already begun doing. The implications hung in the air. Wellness felt the weight of them crushing down on him. The Galactic Council had existed for over 10,000 years. In all that time, they had never encountered a species like humanity. Species either evolved beyond violence before achieving advanced technology, or they destroyed themselves. It was the Great Filter, the fundamental law of galactic civilization, but humans had found a third path. They had maintained their capacity for violence while developing advanced technology by channeling that violence inward, making it a tool for self-discipline rather than destruction. They had turned their greatest weakness into a strange kind of strength. On the 10th day of travel, Wellness finally opened a communication channel to the Council. He knew they were waiting for his preliminary report. But when the Council speaker appeared on his screen, Wellness found himself unable to speak. Ambassador Wellness, the speaker said, her Velthorian features showing concern. We have been waiting for your report. Is there a problem? Wellness struggled to find words. I need more time. The situation on Earth is more complex than anticipated. Complex how? The data seemed straightforward. A primitive species, violent and divided. What complexity could there be? Wellness thought about the memorials, the hospitals, the command centers. He thought about General Park's calculating eyes and Secretary Martinez's firm voice. He thought about Dr. Chen, explaining how humans chose peace despite their nature. He thought about Admiral Rodriguez, showing him weapons designed to kill Council species. They know, Wellness said finally. They know about the Council. They have been watching us. They have been preparing. The Council speaker's expression shifted to surprise. Preparing for what? For war, for contact, for every possibility. Wellness felt something break inside him, a dam of certainty that had held for 200 years. Speaker, I need to make a formal recommendation immediately, before I complete my full report. Go ahead, Ambassador. Velnus took a deep breath, making a decision that he knew would define the rest of his life. I recommend immediate quarantine of the Sol system. Mark it as forbidden space. No contact, no observation, no intervention of any kind, and most importantly, never, under any circumstances, should the Council attempt to interfere with human development. The speaker's eyes widened. Ambassador, that is an extreme recommendation. What did you see on Earth that would justify such a response? I saw warriors, Velnus said quietly. I saw a species that has spent 10,000 years fighting themselves, perfecting the art of war against their own nature. I saw beings who understand violence at a level we cannot comprehend because we evolved beyond it. And I saw what they have built while we watched them, thinking they were primitive. He pulled up the data, the images of human weapons and strategic plans. Speaker, they have mapped every Council world. They have developed weapons specifically designed to counter our defenses. They have simulated war with us and concluded they could win through attrition, and all of this in less than a decade. But you said they were violent and divided, the speaker protested. How could a divided species achieve such coordination? Because they are not as divided as we thought, Velnus replied. When faced with an external threat, humans unify with terrifying speed. Their history shows it repeatedly. They will fight each other endlessly, but the moment they perceive a common enemy, they become a single organism focused entirely on survival. He thought about General Park's words. And Speaker, they do not want to fight us. They have been clear about that. They simply want to be left alone to develop at their own pace. But if we intervene, if we try to guide them or control them or even help them, they will see it as a threat, and they will respond accordingly. The Council speaker was silent for a long moment. Ambassador, the Council has never quarantined a species that showed potential for peaceful development. If humans are as capable as you suggest, perhaps they should be contacted and guided more carefully. No, Velnus said firmly, surprising himself with his vehemence. We are peaceful because we cannot be otherwise. But humans? They are peaceful because they choose to be. Despite every instinct screaming at them to fight, that makes them more dangerous than any species the Council has ever encountered. He leaned forward, his 4 eyes intense. If the Council intervenes, humans will not see guidance. They will see colonialism. They will see their own history of stronger civilizations dominating weaker ones, and they will fight. They will fight with a ferocity that we cannot match, because we have forgotten what fighting truly means. You are afraid of them, the speaker said, and it was not a question. Velnus felt shame at the admission. But he nodded. Yes, I am terrified of them. Not because they are evil or cruel, but because they are warriors who have chosen peace, and if we force them to abandon that choice, we will unleash something the galaxy has never seen before. The communication ended with the speaker promising to convey his recommendations to the full Council. Velnus sat alone in his quarters, knowing that his career was likely over. Ambassadors did not return from routine evaluations recommending quarantine. They did not admit fear. They did not suggest that primitive species might be dangerous to advanced civilizations. But Velnus knew he was right. He had seen something in human eyes that haunted him. Not hatred or malice, but capability. The calm, cold capability of beings who had spent millennia perfecting the art of violence and then choosing not to use it. Warriors who fought themselves every single day and won. The ship arrived at Council space on the 14th day. Velnus stood before the full Council. 47 species represented in their crystalline chamber. They waited for his report, expecting a routine evaluation of a primitive species. Instead, Velnus stood silent. He opened his mouth several times, but words would not come. How could he explain what he had learned? How could he make them understand the danger of a species that had weaponized restraint itself? Ambassador Velnus, the Council speaker prompted. Please deliver your evaluation of humanity. Velnus looked around the chamber, at all those peaceful species who had forgotten what violence truly meant. He thought about trying to explain General Park's strategy, Dr. Chen's philosophy, Admiral Rodriguez's weapons. He thought about trying to make them understand that humanity's daily choice of peace was more significant than the Council's natural pacifism, but he knew they would not understand. They could not. They had evolved beyond the capacity to truly comprehend what humans were. So instead, Velnus said simply, "Quarantine Sol system. Mark it as forbidden space. Never make contact." "On what grounds?" a council member demanded. Velnus met their eyes, his voice hollow. "Because if we interfere with humanity's development, they will teach us what war truly means. And the lesson will destroy us." "That is not an adequate explanation, Ambassador. We need details, analysis, justification." But Velnus just shook his head. "Mark it forbidden. Trust me on this. Please." The council erupted in debate. Some demanded his full report. Others called for his removal. A few, seeing the terror in his eyes, began to wonder what he had seen on Earth. Velnus left the chamber without permission, returning to his ship. What the council did with it was no longer his responsibility. That night, as he sat alone watching the stars, Velnus thought about the humans he had met. He thought about their memorials to horror, their hospitals full of healers, their command centers full of warriors who hoped never to fight. He thought about a species that had built civilization on a foundation of chosen restraint rather than natural peace. And he thought about something General Park had said on their final day. "Every day we do not attack is a gift." Velnus understood now. Humanity was not offering the Council friendship or alliance. They were offering something far more valuable and far more terrifying. Mercy. They had the capacity to wage war across the galaxy, but they were choosing not to. That choice was their gift to the Council. But gifts could be taken back. 3 months later, Velnus heard that the Council had decided to continue observation protocols for Earth, but had agreed to mark Sol system as a restricted zone. It was not the quarantine he had recommended, but it was something. He never learned whether the Council understood his warning. He never knew if they grasped the danger of pushing warriors who had chosen peace. But sometimes, late at night, Velnus would access the encrypted data he had gathered on Earth. Buried deep in military transmissions, he had found something that still made his blood run cold. It was a simple message, transmitted on encrypted channels the moment his ship left Earth's orbit. First contact assessment complete. Subject believes evaluation successful. Continue Phase 2 preparations. Maintain operational security. Timeline unchanged. Timeline unchanged. Velnus had realized, too late, the ultimate truth about humanity. They had not been evaluated by him. He had been evaluated by them. Everything they showed him, every word they spoke, every weapon they revealed had been carefully calculated to produce a specific response. They had wanted him to be afraid. They had wanted him to recommend that the Council leave them alone. They had weaponized his own fear against the very organization he served. And it had worked perfectly. Velnus deleted the message and never spoke of it to anyone. Because if the Council knew the truth, if they understood that humanity had manipulated first contact from the beginning, they might try to intervene. And Velnus knew, with absolute certainty, that such intervention would be the last mistake galactic civilization ever made. Humans were not warriors who had chosen peace. They were strategists who had chosen patience. And they were waiting, preparing, growing stronger with every passing day. The galaxy's age of peace was ending. And it had ended the moment humanity looked up at the stars and decided they would not be victims of whatever they found there. Velnus lived for another 50 years after his return from Earth. He never took another assignment. He never spoke publicly about what he had seen. But every night, he would stare at the stars and think about those patient warriors, waiting in their quarantined system, building, planning, preparing, and he would wonder, as he drifted into uneasy sleep, whether the Council's age of peace would end with a bang or a whimper, whether humanity would announce their arrival with diplomacy or with demonstrations of their terrible capability, but most of all, he wondered if the galaxy would ever truly understand what it meant to face a species that had spent 10,000 years learning how to fight, and then chosen to wait for exactly the right moment to show what they had learned. The age of galactic innocence was over. Humanity had made sure of that, and Velnus, the only being in Council space who truly understood, could do nothing but watch and wait for the inevitable moment when the warriors finally stopped choosing peace and started choosing victory.